tremendous record. Okay, so let's get started for today. This is our 11th presentation in our 15-part Our Homes, Our Votes webinar series. I'm broadcasting to you live from my kitchen table, which is, I guess, a different image than what we were providing you back when we were working from our office. So today we are going to get into a really common sticking point for a lot of the organizations in our network that do election engagement work and do a lot of work specifically in the in communities of people who are homeless. And that is, we are going to talk about the challenge of voting without an address. First, I'd like to cover a couple of things in terms of general logistics. People are often asked, people often put in the chat box their questions. Please do so throughout the presentation. We are going to have a period toward the end of the presentation where we take questions, and it looks like our group today is pretty manageable, around 50 people. So we might even have opportunities for you to unmute and ask your questions. But for now, put them in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and we'll be able to grab them there, and we'll take the questions at the end. We will also provide access to both a video recording and a copy of today's slides to all participants following the webinar. And then finally, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please shoot an email to Brooke Shipwright, or she's one of the panelists in the attendee list. You should be able to, if you're not shooting her an email, chat with her or put something in the questions box. Please let us know if you're having any technical difficulties. It's a lot easier for us to address those now that we've switched to Zoom, so happy days. Agenda for today. We're going to do an introduction of our topic. We're going to do an overview of the Our Homes, Our Votes 2020 project. We'll discuss, because it's such an issue on everybody's mind, a quick update on COVID-19 advocacy. We'll discuss what we're doing to try to bring more local and national voter engagement efforts under one umbrella by offering an opportunity for organizations and advocates to become affiliates of the Our Homes, Our Votes project. And then we'll get into our featured topic, which will be most of our time today, and that's going to be exploring voting without an address and what the solutions are for people with people who are homeless or people without a traditional address assigned in rural areas. The presenters today are myself, Joey Lindstrom from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and Lena O'Rourke, who is a wonderful consultant who we've been working with extensively on this project for many months. And I'm glad we have Lena here to share some of the research that she's recently done on this topic and to participate with all of you. So first, the introduction and the overview of the Our Homes, Our Votes project. If you are a loyal viewer of our webinar series, you've heard this 5-minute introduction of Our Homes, Our Votes several times, and I'm sure you can recite it along with me. So first, Our Homes, Our Votes is our effort to get more and more organizations involved in housing justice throughout the country, paying attention to voter registration, voter education, and voter mobilization, get out the vote, and to elevate the issue of housing with candidates for public office. We do this for a couple of very clear reasons. One is, you can see from this chart that renters participate in elections at lower rates than homeowners. And this disparity is even more alarming when you look at the voter participation rates between low-income households and high-income households. We believe very strongly that these disparities in voter turnout and voter registration are what leads to a policy environment in which the needs of low-income renters is very often ignored by policymakers. Indeed, solutions for high-income homeowners or homeowners generally are prioritized with much more urgency than the needs of low-income renters. We want to change that by demonstrating to candidates that when they talk about the needs of renters, they are rewarded with a lot of votes from a lot of informed renters who are paying attention to that issue. Are voters paying attention to that issue? Well, clearly they already are. The Opportunity Starts at Home campaign led a poll effort, actually, I guess 2 years ago now. Oh no, last year, 2019, that indicated that 83% of the public agrees that elected officials are not paying enough attention to the cost of housing and the need for more affordable housing. And 76% are more likely to vote for a candidate that has a detailed plan for making housing more affordable. So that's the overview of our Homes Are Votes. Before we get into the rest of our topics today, I always want to make sure that we give a quick update on the topic that's on the front of everyone's mind, especially right now, which is the coronavirus, our response to the coronavirus, and the upcoming elections. So just really quickly, our asks, if any of you have been participating in our COVID-19 intervention work, then you know our asks are pretty consistent for the last couple of months. We need $100 billion in emergency rental assistance. We need a comprehensive national eviction moratorium that applies to all renters. And we need $11.5 billion in emergency solutions grant funding to support the work and the needs of the homeless service agencies that are working with people who can't shelter in place because indeed they don't have shelter and they don't have homes. So we are, to this end, hosting a virtual lobby day next Tuesday, July 21st. The time is now for talking to your members of Congress. We need as many people as possible setting up meetings with representatives and senators and their staff and carrying forward these asks or some version of these asks and letting your members of Congress know that housing needs should be a priority in the next spending package. Many of you know that we at NLIHC were quite happy with the way housing was treated in the HEROES Act, which was passed by the House of Representatives. It's overall $200 billion for housing programs, including the top priority of $100 billion in emergency rental assistance. We hope that the Senate, when they move forward with their proposed spending package, will include the housing provisions of the HEROES Act. We don't have a ton of optimism that they'll have the same funding levels, but we'll see. And I think what the Senate does is largely going to be dependent on how many of each of you are reaching out to your members of Congress in the coming days. So for Virtual Lobby Day, we have a lot of resources on the website. There's a link right there on the slide. We've got talking points and fact sheets. We've got guidelines and templates. We're really trying to make it as easy as possible for any of you to participate. As I mentioned last month, there's also a new bill in Congress called the Natural Disaster and Emergency Ballot Act. This is Senate Bill 3529, introduced by Senators Amy Klobuchar and Ron Wyden. And it is a bill to ensure that all states have the option to request absentee balloting and requires at least 20 days of early voting in all states. This is an effort to hopefully administer the elections in such a way where people can safely socially distance by not having to crowd into a polling place on the same day, or as much as possible, vote by mail and vote remotely. Coronavirus and the elections, this is kind of where the two issues that the issue that brings us here today confronts the issue of the pandemic. Obviously, voting is going to be really strange in 2020, and so many of us who were working so hard on our plans for how we were going to engage in the elections have to adjust now and think about how do we do our best campaigns to promote vote by mail. We have to get rid of our door-to-door voter registration efforts in some cases. We can't plan as many town hall meetings with candidates, or we can't do as many meetings with residents associations or anything that requires people gathering as large groups. So we're encouraging people as much as possible to make voters aware of online voter registration tools that can be accessed through their phone and internet. We encourage all of you to share these tools as much as possible through your social media and through your email lists. We also encourage you to plan voter education events, candidate forums, and town halls as remote virtual events. And we have some excellent examples of how similar candidate forums and town halls have been successful in a virtual environment, and we can share those examples with any of you on the call today if you want to reach out. And the fourth note here is somewhat new. Stay up to date with the Our Homes, Our Votes 2020 state-by-state pages. And if you haven't seen one of those pages, it looks a little bit like this, what you're seeing on the right-hand side of your screen. If you go to our website, you can select any of the 50 states. The one you're looking at here is North Dakota, and it'll give you information about the polling times, is early voting available, can I vote by mail, and then several other things related to your state. One of the things you're going to hear about today is that the rules for voting without an address vary heavily from state to state. And so the rules for voting without an address and being registered as a person experiencing homelessness are going to be added in the coming days to our state-by-state pages. We additionally have for resources, updates that we'll be making throughout the coming months, because in many states, the rules regarding no excuse absentee balloting or vote by mail options or early voting are changing rapidly. In some cases, they're caught up in litigation, and the judges will be deciding what vote by mail is and is not available. We'll be posting those updates on our state-by-state pages. So if you're working in a given state, you might want to bookmark that page, and we'll be making sure that updates are available. But since I'm talking about state pages, I really want to encourage any of you who are on this call to let us know about the work that you're doing. If you're generating any media articles, or if you have blogs that we can share about your activities, or if you have updates that we can share on our state pages, we're really eager to do so, because if any of you are working on housing and the election, we want to elevate that and we want to spotlight that. In the coming weeks, we're going to revive our Homes, Our Votes newsletter, and we'll be looking for local and national partners to spotlight and feature in that newsletter, as well as in our social media and so forth. So in terms of thinking about what other organizations are doing in terms of voter engagement, one of our new features is we have an opportunity for you to join Our Homes, Our Votes as an affiliate. And we use the word affiliate because it's a little bit less formal than something like a member and so forth. What we want to show, though, is that all of these various local efforts throughout the country and some of the national efforts that are being launched by other housing organizations are all being done with at least some level of coordination and some level of consistent messaging and focus. And so what our hope is sort of twofold. Number one, that we can become more aware of the various efforts that are happening throughout the country, and becoming aware of who's participating as an affiliate, and sort of having official affiliates of Our Homes, Our Votes will help us track local efforts. But the second thing we're hoping to do is to provide a sense of community for the many localized efforts that are happening throughout the country, so that people can feel that it's all happening under one banner, and that our various efforts are tied together and thusly much, much stronger. So of course, joining as an affiliate, there's no cost, but what you get as an affiliate is a swag package. We'll send you a couple of t-shirts, a couple of stickers, a couple of posters. We'll also provide for you the use of the logo, and we'll allow for any templates and materials to be co-branded with your logo and the Our Homes, Our Votes logo as well. We'll also amplify your efforts through our social media channels, and as I mentioned in our newsletter, in our blog space. And then you'll have access, expanded access really, to guidance from NLIHC field team staff who have been working on this project for many, many months. So with that, I'd like to get to our special topic for today. And I'm going to turn it over to Lena O'Rourke, who I mentioned earlier is a consultant who's been working with us closely on this project. Over the last couple of weeks, Lena has done the really important work of going state by state to figure out how voting without an address is allowed and administered in the various states. She's put together a really helpful table that we are currently formatting into a chart resource that we will have on the Our Homes, Our Votes website, and we will send that out to all of you with the follow-up to this webinar, with a recording with the slides. It's not currently available on our website. That'll be coming shortly. But even though that chart is not yet developed, what is very much available to all of you is all of the information in Lena's brain on voting without an address, which she has recently become very familiar with. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Lena to share what she has learned and some of her perspectives. Lena, take it away.
Joey, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us on this beautiful afternoon. I am excited to talk through with you what I found. First, I want to tell you what I did because it was an interesting exercise in looking at different state voting practices. Basically, what we did was go to each state, look at the voter registration form, and then back out of that to look at the entire process and really what it means to vote without an address. As Joey said, the results were really different by state in terms of what that voter registration application really looks like, what the website looks like, and then how accessible information is on voting without an address. So I'm going to be lifting up for you examples from the different voter registration forms that we found. And I'll read the different language from form to form in some of the examples, because it really is interesting, the word choice context. And then, as Joey said, we've put this all together in a pretty accessible and easy format. So you can see what the rules are in your state, but also what other states do. And in this way, I think together we can identify the practices that really make the most sense in helping individuals without an address, particularly those individuals experiencing homelessness, find the path to voting. So let's start with the most obvious thing about this, which is that it is important to have an address to be able to vote because it determines the precinct in which you vote and the district in which you vote. The residential address, not necessarily the mailing address, the residential address is what helps the election board put you in the right voting precinct. And it also helps identify which candidates you are voting for. All states ask for a residential address on their voter registration form. They will also offer you the opportunity to put a mailing address if that's different. So for a residential address, you can't put a PO box, but you can put a PO box as your mailing address if that's where you regularly and routinely pick up your mail. So all states do that, it makes sense. Options do exist for voters without an address. This is important clearly, and the conversation that we are talking about for voters who are homeless, but it also really applies to and is mostly focused on voters in rural areas who may not be assigned a traditional residential address. And it's also very common for American Indian tribal lands. And this does become a big barrier. Not having a residential address is a big barrier to voting. Next slide, please. The forms, many forms, more than half of states do offer on the actual voter registration form an alternate way for voters without residential addresses to designate where they live. This is, in most cases, the language includes a reference to rural voters who have not been assigned the address, but in some cases it does specifically also mention voters who do not have an address due to experiencing homelessness. We'll come back to that in a second. The way it is most common to see the alternate address on a voter registration form is a little designated section for the voter to draw a map or to provide a written description of where they live. The language does vary from state to state. So the language on the Alaska form is, and this is pulled from the form, you may indicate exactly where you live, such as highway name and milepost number, boat harbor, or trailer park name and space number if you do not have a street name and a house address. If you live in rural Alaska, you may provide the community name as your residential address. In the state of Georgia, their language reads as follows. If you live in an area without house numbers and street names, please include a drawing of your location to assist us in locating your appropriate voting precinct. Other states say you may attach a map. Some states have designated places for a map. A couple of states provide big spaces, small spaces, but you can find them in these 28 states. Next up, please. Slide, please. Then some states on their form do specifically address voters who are experiencing homelessness and directly include language to address individuals without an address who are experiencing homelessness. For example, the voter registration form in Colorado includes a little checkbox for individuals who are expressing homelessness. It has a space where they can list their location as an address, as well as requiring, in this case, a mailing address because they need to receive their voter information. The affidavit says, quote, "I am homeless. This is a location that I regularly return to. I have also included a mailing address in section 5. In Iowa, the voter registration form requests the address where you live, but in the instructions, it has specific instructions for individuals who are homeless. It says, again, in the instructions, if homeless or you do not have an established residence, describe where you reside. In Iowa, the voter registration application provides information on the form for voters who don't have the fixed address. And it says, and this is a longer one, your voting residency requirement address that your voting residence is the location that you consider to be permanent and not a temporary residence. Your voting residence is the place in which your habitation is fixed and to which, whenever you are absent, you intend to return. If you do not have a fixed place of habitation, but you are a consistent or regular inhabitant of a shelter or other location to which you intend to return, you may use that shelter or other location as your residence for the purposes of registering to vote." So you can see the language on the forms gets to the same intent, but really varies dramatically in terms of its inclusiveness, in terms of its description and instructions on how to fill it out for individuals who are experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please, Joey. Some states do not include information or a space to put an alternate address on the actual voter registration form, but include language on the website or on an FAQ. So you would have to know that those two pieces of documentation, the website and the voter registration form, go together. As advocates, we can see that together. As voters, you may not know to look there, but the information is in these FAQs and is quite good. So, or can be quite good, it varies. In Delaware, they have a voter registration page, and on the homepage of the election website, it includes a question on how to vote without a fixed address. Quote, "If you do not have a fixed residence or are homeless or otherwise qualified to vote in Delaware, you may register by completing the proper registration form. If registering in person, you must provide 2 pieces of information. The address can be a shelter, agency, or other location where you regularly receive your mail." The Minnesota registration form, it requires this residential address, but their FAQ is the most comprehensive in terms of how to vote while experiencing homelessness. They actually have a really long answer on their FAQ. Just to quote a little bit of it, "If you are homeless, you can register to vote using the location of where you sleep as your address. You may need to go to the polling place with someone who can confirm where you are living. When you register to vote, you must provide your current address. This is the place you sleep. So if you sleep in a shelter, at a friend's house, or outside somewhere, that is your voting residence. If you sleep outside, write a description of its location." And it goes on in a very conversational and very instructive way for how to go in and how to register to vote. Next slide, please. So looking across all of these voter registration forms, I have clear favorites. I have clear ways that it seems, and I've highlighted a lot of them, in terms of how accessible they make the information, how easy it is to understand, and in turn, how easy it is to put that information in practice to help individuals without addresses register to vote. So as we have reviewed these, the themes that really come up, and the best methods that appear to be developing across the states are to include really clear language on the actual voter registration form, that while an address is required, a residential address is required, that a voting address can be described through a map or a description of the place. It helps if this is prominently done, lots of space for drawing the map, or clear instructions that you can attach a map or a description to the voter registration page. That really helps lift up those instructions. The language around this, the language for describing how to vote without a residential address, should specifically mention individuals who are experiencing homelessness. Right now, the vast majority of these forms either say if you do not have a residential address or address rural voters, but the checkbox should be very clear that we are solving this solution includes people who are experiencing homelessness. And finally, and particularly given the large variability of what we found on state boards of election websites, there should be direct information for individuals who are experiencing homelessness and how they can register to vote without a fixed address available on the website. The states that do it really well, including in the FAQs, including a prominent mention on the website. But this is an important tool, both for voters and for advocates, to be able to find the information that they need, and has a place in making it easier to both to find and to navigate this system. So with that, Joey, I will turn it back to you for anything that I forgot or anything you want to lift up to make clearer.
Thank you so much, Lena, for that excellent presentation and for your excellent work that informs us all on these important features. One thing I should be quick to add to Lena's presentation is that we, in putting this together for all of you today, were very lucky to have the example of the "You Don't Need a Home to Vote" resource that for many years has been put together by the National Coalition for the Homeless, and I believe they're likely to do an update of that resource for 2020. We use that as a guide and in terms of starting out our work and reaching out to all of these different state websites and doing this research. So we're really grateful for the National Coalition for the Homeless and the example that they set in some of this work and informing our efforts here. What I'd like to do now is hear questions from folks who are participating in today's webinar. Everyone, feel free to add your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and I will start taking a look at what needs to be answered. All right. It doesn't look like any questions have come in yet. Oh, let's see. So we have a question about sharing the information broadly with people who do not have access to the internet. And I think that's a really great point. We will be posting this on all of our state pages, but as I mentioned earlier, Lena's research is being put together, or has been put together, in a really helpful table. And we're turning that table into a branded resource that you can print out and take and sort of distribute. However, that resource probably isn't the best thing to share, because of course, you know, when you're working with people who are on the street, they're probably living all in the same community or all in the same state. What will be most effective is finding the FAQ sheet or the space on the website of a given state, elections board or Secretary of State's office, and printing out the information that they have on how to vote without an address in a given state. I don't know, Lena, do you think I answered that question suitably?
Yes, but I'm going to add to it just one or two small things. This wasn't what I was looking for, so I can't really speak to the number of states, but I was surprised by the number of states that to get a registration form, you have to begin the process online and enter information online so that they check the state database to see if you're already registered, et cetera, et cetera. And so I am not registered in the state of Montana. And so I could not even get to the point where I could see the voter registration form. I just offer this as an interesting new dynamic that's happening as a lot of these systems move online. Now, clearly, if you're in the States, you can go to the Board of Elections, the libraries, the various places where you can fill out voter registration forms. They make in-person options for voter registration available, and they note that on the forms. But even for individuals who have access to the internet, it is hard to get the paper form and to bring it. So there's some nuances here, I think, that we all need to think together in terms of how to help individuals without reliable access to the internet, how to help draw down the forms and the information to put it in the hands of the individuals and the advocates who are doing the voter registration. There are just some complications that will vary from state to state. And so tracking those and seeing what the best practices around them as well, feel like that will be important this election cycle to make it as easy as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Lena, for that additional detail. And that actually leads as a good segue to the next question that's come in from Judy Winkelstein, who asks, any suggestions for how libraries can be involved in making sure people experiencing homelessness can vote? And I think that's a really good segue, because I think a lot of people who are homeless use the internet at libraries. And I think the key thing for librarians will be to know what the rules are for voter registration in their state and community, and to provide, whether it's possible to provide a stack of forms, or if all registration is online, providing some instructions at the computer terminals on how to find the voter registration site and how to proceed, and how to enter an address for a person who is homeless, being aware of course, the different standards for a given state. Any other thoughts on that, Lena, from you?
No, no, I think that's all right. I mean, these FAQs that I think are, when there are FAQs that are so good and include specific information, having those printed to hand out along with the voter registration form, you know, making sure that there's somebody who's able to help with that process, and clearly getting the libraries reopened, you know, between now and this election cycle, you know, figuring out the role libraries can play in outreach when the libraries themselves are closed will be a challenge. I know my library has reopened in a limited capacity, and when I walk in, the voter registration forms are right there when I'm going to do my contactless pickups. So it may take some clever navigating to figure out the role that they can play given the still widespread closures of libraries. But I think there's a lot of creative solutions there. We'll just have to figure out again together what they are.
I think that's a great point, Lena, and especially being mindful of the widespread closures of libraries. Julie, I hope you'll reach out to me after the webinar about this question, because I think my suggested practices might be different if you're working with folks in one state or one community, or if you're hoping to organize with librarians throughout the country or throughout multiple states and so forth. But thank you very much for that question. Any other questions at this time? It looks like I'm not seeing anything else in the Q&A box yet, but folks, take a moment. Take a moment. I'll look in the chat box as well. Doesn't look like. All right, everybody, questions, going once, going twice.
Hey, Joey, this is Lena. Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
Sorry, just one more observation. Thinking about the libraries and the fact that they would still be closed. When the state voter registration pages are, again, quite variable in how easy they make it to get the registration forms. Most have the download button, some do not. I have an anecdotal survey also has shown that the State Board of Election websites, while the official source, are kind of boring and very functional. However, they have companion sites I saw in a handful of states, in a dozen or so states, that have put together COVID specific either pages or alternate sites, microsites about voting during COVID and what contactless voting and mail-in voting really looks like right now. I just offer that as an alternate source of information and locations. They're being very clear on those websites about where you can get voter registration information. They include on those websites, and I of course, they're in the chart when we get that out. You can see where some of those are, because it's worth poking around some other states' sites on how to request both your voter registration form and your ballot by mail without having to go to a location, or if the locations near you are closed. So I think we'll see more coming up over the next couple of weeks as states really grapple with the voting challenge. But I also encourage, looking at the complementary sites, thinking that through. They are not designed with our target population of individuals experiencing homelessness in mind, but they may be a really useful resource for all of us in finding the forms, the FAQs, and just shortcutting through the state bureaucracy into these much more designated sites. Thanks, Joey. That's all. Just wanted to get that last thing.
No, I really appreciate you pointing out that there are a lot of resources out there that people should be on the lookout for. I think some states are really doing a good job of making sure people are informed as they go about their voter campaigns. I am seeing, I'm looking in the questions box, and I think I'm seeing another one here. Oh, this is interesting. So Lena, so this is a question that I don't have an answer to. And Lena, I don't know if this is something that you found in any of your research. But we have a question here in the questions box about fear among some people who are unsheltered homeless, who might list on their voter registration form that they live on a bench at a given park, or they live under a given overpass, or something of that nature, or maybe they might be sleeping in a parking garage or something like that. But if they list this living location on a document that is publicly available, there might be legitimate fears that they might be then rousted or removed from their sleeping location. And honestly, that's a question I don't have an answer to. I don't know, Lena, do you have any thoughts on this?
It's an excellent question, and one to which I do not have an answer. I will answer a slightly different question, though, which is the voter registration forms by law do include good information about the information that they can share. The residential address is one of those pieces, though. But I don't think across the information available on the forms themselves and on the supporting websites, they do not speak to safeguarding the information against that type of use.
So one aspect of this issue that we haven't explored here today, though maybe we should for the next time we do this webinar, is for people who are survivors of domestic violence. They face some of this same hesitation of ever filling out a form where their address can be listed, because of course, so many people who are survivors of domestic violence don't want to be found, right? So most states, I think in fact all states, have a process by which people who are survivors of domestic violence can register to vote in a way where their address is never publicly available. Now, I don't know, and I'd have to do some research to learn if that is a protection for safety that is broadly available to people for multiple reasons, or if it's only available to people in a domestic violence situation. My guess would be it varies state by state, but I'd really have to look into that.
Joey, this is Lena. I
Yeah.
do think it varies state by state. I did see states with other protected classes of address. So for example, a handful where if you are a reproductive health provider, you may also have your address in this same program as with domestic violence survivors. So it does vary state by state, but I looked at those and I do not have a sense on how they are established, but homelessness was not one of the categories listed in the states.
Yeah, I think that's what I would expect. But yeah, this is kind of a fraught consideration. This is interesting. I'm looking in the chat box. I'm seeing, did other Kristen from Rhode Island posted that yes, it's a state-by-state policy for domestic violence survivors. And yeah, in Rhode Island, it looks like there's no explicit protections for people experiencing homelessness. So I guess, I am very proud that when we do our presentations, we have, great expertise and we're able to answer all questions. But this one, I think we'll have to explore a little bit and see if we can include more information in follow-up. I'll tell you, my initial hunch is that there isn't additional information to include. My hunch is that most states do not protect people without an address from any type of potential harassment or legal consequences if they list an address that's not meant for human habitation. That's an interesting consideration. I'm really grateful that was brought up. Other questions, perhaps one that we can answer suitably. Any other questions to explore? I'm seeing none right now. Okay. So we're going to pause on the questions. I'm going to be talking for a couple more minutes before ending the webinar. So if a burning question pops into your mind, you have that much time to drop it into the questions box. Reminder, third Thursdays at 3 is a monthly webinar. We've got voter mobilization part 1 coming up in August. We're going to talk about early voting and vote by mail. That's going to be a big topic. We will also talk about in August something that we weren't able to include in June, which is language justice and the ballot and accessing the ballot in various languages. We're going to do voter mobilization part 2 in September and talk about specifically protecting voters against voter intimidation efforts and making sure that their right to vote is something that they can exercise. In October, we're going to talk about Election Day specifically. And frankly, over the next coming months, I think I'm going to be excited to learn what that presentation is going to look like, because I think Election Day is going to be a lot different than we had originally envisioned it when we started Our Homes, Our Votes 2020. And then, of course, we will do in November holding candidates to their promises and talk about the best ways to follow up on our various election campaigns. I really want to thank all of you for being in touch today. I want to remind you that NLIHC is a membership organization, and we rely on memberships to support our work in all that we do, including our voter engagement work. Please consider going to nlihc.org/membership and becoming an individual or organizational member today if you aren't one already. We would really appreciate that. And then finally, stay in touch, contact us. I really had a question that I wanted to follow up with earlier. I think many of you might have questions, but one of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, we're launching this affiliate effort to be an Our Homes, Our Votes affiliate is we're really eager to know what you're doing. We're also eager to know what you're thinking about doing or considering doing that maybe we can help you get off the ground, right? So what you're looking at here is a map of the NLIHC organizers by state. And you'll see that myself and Tori and Kyle and Brooke, we've all got a particular geography where we're the point person for people who are participating in Our Homes, Our Votes, or any of our campaigns. And any of us on the field team would be really eager to hear from you, what you're working on and how we can be supportive of that effort, even if that's just spotlighting it in our newsletter or sharing about it on social media. Please do feel free to reach out. In addition to that being available on the slide, Brooke very helpfully posted that in the chat box. And I'll also highlight in the chat box, we have links to the virtual lobby day space on our webpage, as well as the Our Homes, Our Votes affiliate page where you can sign up to be an Our Homes, Our Votes affiliate. Okay, it looks like we might have another question. I'm taking a quick look. Okay, I think that's a question that we will have to follow up on individually. So I am going to, at this time, thank everyone for their participation, and we will be in touch with follow-up materials very soon. Thanks, Lena. Thanks, everybody. Bye.